Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my top 25 after week one of football. It's going to be pretty simple. I feel like everybody's on the same page. Only a couple things that I guess people would probably not agree with entirely. But these first ones are pretty simple. Number one, you got Georgia. There's no question about that whatsoever. Georgia absolutely dominated Clemson. Now, I will say Clemson had a pretty good offense, or I'm sorry, defense. What am I saying? Offense. I mean, like a lot of people just look at the final score 34-3 and say, "Oh, like Clemson's just bad again. They're just overranked." But ultimately, going into halftime, the score was 6-0, and entering the fourth quarter, it was still like 20-3. It was a close defensive game. Clemson was in it for a long time, and they gave Georgia a hard time. So, I mean, don't dock Clemson for that. Don't just say they were overrated. I just think Georgia is that good. Georgia's just that good. Like, they have the Clemson defense, but they don't have the Clemson offense. They have a much better offense. And Georgia's going to be a very, very tough team to beat once again this year. Number two, you got Ohio State. They didn't really play anybody. They took care of business. Simply, nothing needs to be said there. Texas as well. I think they shut out Colorado State. I believe so. And number four, I got Bama. They also took care of business. These three teams didn't really play many. They didn't really play anybody. But at number five, I've got Notre Dame. I really do think, even though the Texas A&M quarterback had a horrendous game, can you necessarily use that as a reason why Notre Dame won this? Or should you use the reason that Notre Dame's defense was giving them such a hard time? I think both are definitely options, but all in all, Notre Dame went into an absolutely stacked Texas A&M crowd, and they didn't win by like a last-second field goal. They didn't win by a point. They won by 10. They won by a convincing amount in a very defensive matchup. Yes, that came at the end of the game, but in a hard-fought game like that, you'll take a 10-point victory as Notre Dame. That's a very impressive win for Notre Dame to go on the road to a stadium with 100,000-plus people in it and win in such a defensive battle. Congratulations to Notre Dame. I've got them in my top five, a team that I docked at the start of the year. Maybe they're for real. Either that or Texas A&M is just hideous, but, that's always in the back of everybody's heads. Number six, Ole Miss. They absolutely annihilated, Furman or something? You know what? I think this is their ranking in the normal top poll. I've got Oregon down at number 7. I feel like this is reasonable for a lot of people. Showing up their first game, they struggled in their home stadium against Idaho. Now, granted, I'm not sure about the second score, but the first score for Idaho was a trick play. But I think the second one might have been a trick play as well. Maybe like a reverse or something like that. I don't know. I think they scored off of 2 trick plays, but still, if it takes trick plays for Idaho to score points, Oregon's defense is doing its job. The real question was their offense, which was definitely struggling at times. And the head coach for Oregon has really got to pull a 360 right now. He's got to stop with the aggressive play calls. He was an aggressive play caller last year, and it ended up being his demise. And it was almost his demise in this game, as there were multiple times where they chose to go for it on fourth downs where they should not be going for it whatsoever. He's got to stop his aggressive play calling, because I can guarantee you this, it's going to lead to their demise against a team like Ohio State or Michigan. It's going to lead to their demise. They need to watch themselves, and they need to play more normally. Stop with the aggressive play calling, because ultimately that handed 2 possessions to Idaho, one of which I think they scored off of. And it's like you can't do that. You can't do that. That's just terrible. You punt the ball away. You don't need to do that against Idaho. It's not that serious. Number 8, Penn State. I also docked this team. I said I didn't really have much faith in this team. I had a lot of faith in them last year. They did not meet my expectations. But ultimately in the second game, even though I still think West Virginia really, really got screwed out of this by multiple factors, a nice big old push off right before halftime that just the refs just got flashbanged or something before they saw the catch, because the dude absolutely pushed off of them, set them up for a touchdown, which they would later score off of a good catch, but still, it shouldn't even be there in the first place. And then a massive weather delay, an absolutely massive weather delay that pushed the game back hours. And when teams have that giant weather delay, they don't perform that good. They don't perform that good afterwards. So Penn State, you can stay in my top 10, and they were a good team. They definitely showed a lot of life. And I was more impressed with their quarterback this time around. And I was definitely impressed with their running back. But still, I think the game should have gone a little differently. West Virginia definitely got a little screwed in that game by whether it was refs or whether it was rain. Number 9, I got Missouri. This team is, they're being forgotten right now. Nobody's really talking about this team, it feels like. And even though I'm still a little questionable about their quarterback, because ultimately, Missouri, if they had a more capable quarterback, like if they had somebody who didn't make bad turnovers, they would have gone undefeated last year, because ultimately 3 interceptions stand out to their losses last year. A pick 6 against LSU, practically, I think it was like, I don't think the guy in Georgia got all the way there, but it was practically a pick 6, so like a fat D lineman, and then a bomb that was just thrown to the defense. 3 interceptions stand out to me that led to Missouri's demise, and it's still, it's going to be down to, can he not make those bad turnovers, which it comes down to that for every quarterback, except this guy seems to be more prone to it. However, they just, I think they're going to come out of the gates and be a good team. I think they're top 10 worthy. There's no reason they should be held out of the top 10 right now. Number 10, I've got Utah. So there's 2 teams that have dropped out of the top 10 for me, Florida State and Michigan. We all know why Florida State's dropping out, but some people might be a little mad about the Michigan dropping out, but we'll get to that later. However, Utah, I think this team is probably going to be very, very good. I mean, Cam Rising, I know it's Southern Utah. But Cam Rising went 10 for 15, 254 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He threw 15 passes, completed 10 of them. 5 of them were touchdowns. Dude had a 33% chance to throw a touchdown in the game. If Cam Rising was going to throw the ball, there was a 33% chance he was throwing a touchdown. It's obviously not what that means, but from a numbers standpoint, that's what it looks like. 10 for 15, not that good. 250 yards, that's pretty good for 10 for 15. 5 touchdowns, that's insane. Now, it's Southern Utah, so, you can't be like, you can't get too crazy about it. They also had a stellar wide receiver, 3 receptions, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Everybody wants to talk about this T-Mac guy from Arizona. They want to talk about this T-Mac guy from Arizona who had 10 receptions for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is a fabulous stat line. But how come nobody wants to talk about the Utah wide receiver who pretty much did half of that in 3 catches, 3 whole catches? He went 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in 3 catches. That's 7 less than whatever dude's name is, the T-Mac. I mean, obviously T-Mac had a much better game, and it's hard to say that, but, 3 receptions, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's on better pace than T-Mac, but nobody would bat an eye to Utah like that. I think Utah's getting pretty glossed over, and a lot of people are having Utah as a 4 seed just because they think the Big 12 is just going to be hideous this year. I don't think that's the case at all. Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Utah, even some other teams in the Big 12 look pretty damn good this year and actually have some firepower. It's just there's a lot of it that is dog shit. But for some reason, when it comes down to the Big 12 teams, everybody just says, they're all ass. All the little teams are ass. But that logic never applies to the Big 10, apparently. Number 11, USC. I've got them skyrocketing, and everybody can assume why. Obviously, a very, very statement. I said statement win like 50 times in my video yesterday. But a big statement win against LSU. Miller Moss I wouldn't say he filled the shoes of Caleb Williams, but he definitely filled the shoes of the much-needed quarterback for USC's offense. And he fit them good because he went 27 for 36, 378 yards, and 1 touchdown, which is a fabulous stat line. And ultimately, USC had some insane receivers making some ridiculous catches. But more importantly, and why I'm so confident in putting USC up this high, was they had a efficient defense. They had an efficient defense. These were two teams last year that struggled horrendously in defense, and both teams showed out defensively. They made it difficult. In a game where they were slinging yards, there was very little points scored. 27-20 is getting to that higher scoring game, but compared to what these teams were, a major improvement. And that's very important for USC because we know they have a high-powered offense. That was aware. If you give them a defense now, this team's a threat. And I've got them just outside of the top 25. But they're going to have time to prove it. They get to host Notre Dame later in the year. That's going to be fun. They get to host Penn State later in the year. That's going to be fun. On the road at Michigan will even be fun. USC, man, I mean, they could pull a 360 from last year. At number 12, I've got Michigan. This team just, they handled business. They won 30-10 against Fresno State. 10 points scored by Fresno State. I mean, the game was literally close until 5 minutes and 43 seconds left when Michigan finally scored another touchdown to go up 23-10, and then it took a pick six to seal the game. The Michigan quarterback went 15 for 25, 118 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, whereas the running back went 15 carries for 92 yards. That's their leading rusher. That was their leading rusher. Donovan Edwards had 11 carries for 27 yards. That's not good. Michigan did not come out of the gates and look like a good football team against a team like Fresno State. Fresno State's not good. So Michigan got them dropping a couple spots. Miami, they're shooting up a bunch of spots. Obviously, you go into the swamp and you handle business. I found this interesting. Cam Ward came out and said that some of these SEC, or at least, the swamp, was not as intimidating as hard as some of the Pac-12 crowds he went up against, like Oregon, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was really interesting because the swamp is a absolutely notorious, difficult stadium to play in. And Cam Ward just, puts him down, saying Oregon's a harder place to play. Even Oregon is a hard place to play, but harder than the swamp? That's crazy. Could it just be Miami to Florida hate? Who knows? But Cam Ward, I believe he's number 1 on the Heisman watch list right now. And I think he should be because 26 for 35, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That 1 interception wasn't too pretty, but he also had 3 carries for 33 yards. And he wasn't taking hits. He was running these out of bounds. He was just skedaddling. That vision, that court vision, I guess you could say, to just fly away like that. And he wasn't even trying to run. Dude was just prancing out of bounds. He wasn't even trying. He was just making plays happen. He was unstoppable against this Florida team. I mean, it wasn't even close. As well as you've got Xavier Restrepo, 7 receptions, 112 yards, and 1 touchdown. He's great. I mean, he was great last year. He's great this year. Damian Martinez, 15 carries, 65 yards. He was great at Oregon State last year, transferring to Miami. He's going to be good. This Miami team's built. This Miami team has a lot of names on it that I like, and I think they're going to be very, very good and probably win the ACC. Number 14, you got Tennessee. Got them moving up a spot. Now, in my early prediction video, I've got Tennessee losing to NC State because, I thought NC State was going to be a bit better. But looking at it now, I think Tennessee's got this one. I think Tennessee's got this one in the books. Their quarterback, Nico I'm not pronouncing that last name. He seems to be pretty stellar. I was questionable because last year Tennessee was ranked so highly, and Joe Milton did not look that good at Tennessee. He did not look that good. I don't understand the hype behind him other than he has a very big arm. I didn't really like Joe Milton, and the team looked hideous last year. And I kind of thought they were just going to walk down this path, but ultimately, their running back and their quarterback showed out in a 69-3 victory. Nothing much to be said there. They absolutely handled business. Number 15, Oklahoma. Same with them. Got them moving up a spot because Florida State got knocked out. They absolutely handled Temple with Temple putting on some fart field goal at some point. The quarterback, Jackson Arnold, 17 for 25, 141 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That's pretty cool. In 141 yards, he managed to throw 4 touchdowns. I don't know how he managed to do that, but let's see. Did he rush? 11 carries for 34 yards. Not the craziest dual threat ever against Temple. Not a very showy, impressive performance by Oklahoma, but, can't dock them because they killed their team. Number 16, LSU. Only got him dropping a couple spots, and I've got USC absolutely rising. LSU started off the last year. They lost to Florida State. They're starting off this year with a loss to USC. What did LSU do last year when they lost to Florida State? They bounced back. They built their team back. That's exactly what I think they're going to do. And I think Brian Kelly is absolutely pissed right now. I felt really bad for him in the interview where he hit his hand against the table in frustration because he finds himself in the same spot as last year. You got to imagine how frustrating it is to start off the year like this twice in a row. After you think you learned from your mistake, you just want to avoid it, and it happens again. That's got to be so frustrating. But they play Nichols. They play at South Carolina, which South Carolina looks like they're probably going to be the worst team in the SEC. They host UCLA, I believe. I don't think that's a neutral site. Then they host South Alabama before they host Ole Miss. And I think once you get to that point, once you get to the Ole Miss, LSU's really going to flip around. They're really going to turn around. They're probably going to win all those games in a row. At Arkansas might be a little difficult, might be a little bit more difficult because Arkansas didn't look bad at all in their first game. I mean, the team they played is always just hideous, but they beat the crap out of them. So maybe Arkansas won't be terrible by that point. At Texas A&M is going to be hard, but they get to host Alabama, and then they host Vanderbilt at Florida. No more faith in Florida, and then they host Oklahoma. This team has the power to win the rest of the year, with this being their only loss. They have the power. It's not going to be easy whatsoever, but they have the ability to do it. I don't think this team should drop too much. I think they're still going to be a good team, and I was impressed with their quarterback in that game with his only interception coming right at the end of the game on a pretty bad throw. But, shit happens. Dude is a dog. He wants it. He beats himself down every time he makes a mistake. He has a lot of passion for the game, and I was kind of just like, who is this nobody? Like, yeah, right. Now that I've seen him play, I'm actually rooting for the kid. I think he's pretty cool. So I hope LSU succeeds. Number 17, I've got Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, this is where they were ranked. This is where they will stay. They beat South Dakota State, which was impressive. To some people, I pretty much expected Oklahoma State to win this, but they play Arkansas next and then at Tulsa. Oklahoma State, their ranking will really move once they get into week 4 and play Utah, and they host Utah. And then the week after that, they're on the road at Kansas State. So at that point, shit's going to get tough. But until then, Oklahoma State, they beat the crap out of South Dakota State. There was no reason anybody should have been picking South Dakota State in that game. That was a stupid, dumbass prediction by people. I don't know why. What was going through people's brains when they said South Dakota State was going to win that. Kansas State, number 18. Same with them. Absolutely handled business. And I mean, it was definitely a struggling start for Kansas State. 17-3 going into halftime wasn't pretty. especially 6-17, like midway through the third quarter was not pretty, but Kansas State kicked it into overdrive. Avery Johnson was all right. 14 for 21, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. But let's see how much he ran for here. Three carries, 37 yards. That's pretty damn good. 3 carries, 37 yards. That's pretty good. So Kansas State, they look to be relatively solid. They'll stay where they are. Number 19, I got Clemson. Clemson, even though I say, they played Georgia well, and I do think they are a pretty good team, I've got them only dropping 5 spots. They are a heavily defensive team. Their offense wasn't able to perform against a defense like Georgia's, and there's a lot of teams out there with defenses like Georgia's. Whoa. There's not a lot of teams out there with defenses like Georgia's, but there's a lot of teams that are up there with Georgia's defenses, okay? Georgia's on another level, but there's a lot of teams out there with really solid defenses like Georgia's, sort of like Georgia's. And Clemson put up a whole whopping 3 points. And ultimately, if your offense can't perform, you're not going to win football games, even if your defense is absolutely stellar. Because, it already proved that that's not how that's going to work, because there's teams like Georgia, teams that are, or like even USC, teams that have good offenses and defenses. Clemson is heavily defensive, not really offensive. They'll probably remain in the top 25 for the remainder of the year, but they play Appalachian State in their they play Appalachian State next week. In week 3 they play on 9/7, September 7th. So, but Appalachian State, they are notorious for going on the road and winning games. Do not blink twice at that game. And it'll really come down to how Clemson actually looks as a football team if they can win that game. Number 20, I got Kansas. This team is absolutely forgotten this year. Like, absolutely forgotten. Yep. They are absolutely forgotten. And they handled business, to say the least, against Lindenwood. Yeah, Lindenwood. The only points came on at the end of the game. The only reason I was skeptical to put this team up, even though I have very high hopes for Kansas this year, the only reason I was skeptical is because their quarterback didn't perform that well. Jalen Daniels is finally back. We get to see him play. Let's hope he doesn't get hurt. But he went 9 for 15, 148 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. An interception to Lindenwood? That's not good at all. But the main reason why I kept my confidence in them was because of their running game. Devin Neal, who is a very, very good running back, went 8 carries, 112 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They also had a receiver, Luke Grimm, have 6 receptions, 111 yards, and 1 touchdown. And so I'm not really sure. Maybe they subbed out. Maybe they subbed out Jalen Daniels pretty early on because, it looks like Cole Ballard, the backup, came in at some point, went 5 for 6, 51 yards, and a touchdown. So maybe they subbed out. Maybe they just took out Jalen Daniels earlier. Maybe they weren't having him throw the ball too much because, after all, dude is injury prone, to say the least. Let's see. Where are we? End of second quarter. Trying to see. Yeah, now we're at Cole Ballard at the end of the second quarter. I think once the game got to halftime, it looks like they took him out. So he only got to play a half. So, Kansas has still got hope, at least in terms of the quarterback position. But I know Jalen Daniels is capable. It's just more of like, is he capable after his injury? That's what I'm questioning. But in terms of what he proved himself last couple years, he is an absolutely capable quarterback, 1,000%. And I've got full faith in this Kansas team putting them up here. At number 21, I've got Georgia Tech. Now, their win against Florida State is starting to look worse and worse as Boston College hits the road and beats Florida State. But I still think Georgia Tech is going to be a very good football team this year. I don't think we should like obviously a win in Ireland against Florida State to start the year had everybody's heads turned, and a big upset to start the year. But I also think the win against Georgia State, not only just the win, but like the annihilation, was actually a more impressive win than people think. Georgia State's not a bad football team, and they actually get Vanderbilt in their home stadium. I don't think people should be surprised if Vanderbilt loses that game. I don't think Georgia State is a bad team, and Georgia Tech handled business against them. I think Georgia Tech definitely looks to be a good team. They have to play on the road at Syracuse, who really struggled with Ohio, which Ohio's not terrible, but they struggled pretty much. They just had an offense, but doesn't look like too good of a defense. I think Georgia Tech might get another road win. I guess you could count the game in Ireland as a road game, but I think you'll get another road win for Georgia Tech, and this team should be placed in the top 25. I don't care if Florida State is not a top 25 team. I think Georgia Tech should still be up here. Number 22, I've got Washington. Now, Washington looked all right, to say the least, in their opener against Weber State. But there's a lot of stuff about, like, they're one of the best teams in the FCS. So for some reason, when South Dakota State and North Dakota State are so highly praised, when Weber State's a couple steps below, it just looks bad for Washington. And even then, Washington handled business. Even though if it's not 56-3, people say you struggle. They didn't really struggle. I mean, they were up 14-0 going into halftime. They were up 28-3 going into the fourth quarter. Their defense absolutely locked this team down, and the quarterback, Will Rogers, he went 20 for 26, 250 yards and a touchdown. The running back, Jonah Coleman, 16 carries, 127 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Washington looked like a complete team, and I don't think they should be kept out of the top 25. I think they're worth it. I think we're just avoiding trying to make another bad top 25 ranking for the former national championship competitor. I think people are just like trying to avoid a TCU type of deal. Washington should be in the top 25, and they should have been at the start of the year. Number 23, Iowa. At first, I was looking at this, and I was like, oh, boy, Iowa, because they went into halftime up 6-0, but they finally found their groove, and Cade McNamara went 21 for 31, 251 yards and 3 touchdowns. The running back, Caleb Johnson, went 11 carries, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Iowa handled business and, ultimately shut this team out. And obviously Iowa's going to have a good defense, but maybe their offense isn't going to be too bad this year. I don't want to speak too early on that, but I've got them moving up a couple spots because I've got U of A moving down. Now, everybody wants to talk, and this is not bias, okay? I really don't care that much about where U of A gets ranked. I was one of the only people last year who had that team, who had U of A being a 3-loss team. Nobody else believed in it. I had them being a 3-loss team, and they were, okay? This is not bias, but I watched that New Mexico game versus U of A because that was when my Sun Devils were on. I was flipping between the two games, preying on U of A's downfall, but that's besides the point. All I'm saying is U of A obviously is their whole eyes are turned to T-Mac. And dude is a dog. He is a great receiver. He's very, very tall. 6'5", 212 pounds. He's a big boy. And dude is fast. He is a complete wide receiver, and he went 10 receptions, 304 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And their quarterback, Noah Fafita, went 19 for 31, 422 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. The interception was like a deflection, I think, into the air. It just floated around. But ultimately, the reason why I'm dissing U of A is not because of their offense. I've got complete faith in U of A's offense. They are chilling offensively. But their defense. New Mexico lost their season opener in their home stadium to Montana State, who is a top FCS team, but still lost it. And U of A allowed New Mexico to score 39 points on them. the line for this game was like 30. It was 29 at the end of the day. It was like 30 something, I believe, but it drops always before the game. U of A scored 61 points. Okay, a touchdown with 2 minutes and 24 seconds left to, I wouldn't say pad the score because it was a highly offensive matchup and you never know what could happen, but still. To make it 61, they scored some points at the end. But going into halftime, the score was 24-27, with U of A only being up a field goal. This was not impressive, in my opinion. The offensive performance for U of A, good job. We knew you guys were going to be good. You didn't need to tell us twice. But in terms of the defense, they were hideous. They let New Mexico drop 471 yards on them. 471 yards. And New Mexico's offense was having an absolute breeze. I mean, 29 first downs and 2 for 2 on fourth down efficiency. U of A couldn't get a stop. It was just 2 interceptions thrown by the New Mexico quarterback. But what do you expect? It's New Mexico. That's why I've got U of A barely hanging on in the top 25 because they've taken USC's place as the highly offensive, or even LSU. They're the highly offensive, no defense team. Because, I mean, you cannot let a team like New Mexico score 39 points on you as the number 21 team in the country. I would personally not put your faith in this team just because they've got a Heisman performing wide receiver on their team. I would not put your money on this. This team is too sketchy. They don't have a defense. They're fool's gold, just like USC last year. And number 25, I was so tempted to put my Sun Devils up there, but I would have just done it. I would have just done it just because this would be the only time they'd get ranked. But I'm not gonna. I'm gonna keep Texas A&M in the top 25 because I still feel like they've still got some working to do. And I feel like once they get into their flow mamba, I think they'll figure things out. And that really comes down to the quarterback for Texas A&M. He looked hideous in his game, and whether that comes down to Notre Dame's defense or just his abilities as a quarterback, he's got to perform against these next couple games. He plays McNeese, which should be an absolute victory, but more importantly, he plays at Florida, which that should not be a loss after how Miami performed. If they lose that, Texas A&M has lost my faith. But then after that, if they manage to pull that off, they host Bowling Green, host Arkansas. If they win all of those games, they get their shining opportunity hosting Missouri. They get their shining opportunity right there. That'll be the comeback for Texas A&M. And until that point, if they lose in between that time, I dock them. I get them out of here. And if they barely win, I might even kick them out then. But if they can figure out a quarterback situation, I'm full faith in Texas A&M's defense because their coach is a defensive mastermind. I mean, holding Notre Dame to 23 points was good. And yeah, Texas A&M, I don't think losing to number 7 in the country should take you out of the top 25. I think that's a respectable loss. But anyways, that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your top 25 teams in the comments. Let me know if you have a team that I talked down on actually being good. Let me know if you still have faith in Florida State. If you do, you're probably a part of the 0.0001% of fans in the country. But anyways, that's all for me. A like and subscribe would help. A comment always helps, and that's all for me. Adios.